Hello and welcome to Masala Podcast. I am so thrilled and excited to have with me Michelle Ranavat, who is the founder of a fabulous beauty brand, a luxury beauty brand called Ranavat, which you've probably heard of. And I've been following Michelle's journey and her work, and I am super, super, super thrilled to have her on Masala Podcast. Michelle, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
So let's start at the beginning. I knew you grew up in a small town, Wisconsin, and I guess you were an Indian family growing up maybe in a not a very Indian area. Could you tell me a little bit about how that was for you?
Yeah, I think it's also the time in which it was happening. So in the 80s, there just wasn't, a lot of South Asians, or, we were just as a percentage of the US population quite small. And especially when you add a rural community like Wisconsin to that, there just were not many of us. And so it was really sort of, I wouldn't say isolating, but people didn't really understand us. And even just from an American culture perspective, being vegetarian was something that people just really didn't understand. I mean, now I think being vegetarian is probably quite trendy, or even being vegan, and everyone knows about it. But back then, even differences like that,
Yeah.
made a huge impact on how we were perceived and just making friends and fitting in, really.
I guess fitting in, belonging, these are themes that come up with every guest. And particularly if you don't kind of live in the country where your kind of heritage is from, there's this constant juggling of who you are, your identity, and where you belong or where you feel you belong. So I guess my question to you is, did you feel like you belonged when you were growing up in Wisconsin?
I felt like I belonged to the South Asian community in many ways. So when we were, hanging out with our family, friends, or cousins, it felt very nice because we were all going through the same thing. In school, I felt like I belonged if I was sort of playing that role of, okay, let's not talk about what makes me different and just kind of fit in. And so, I belonged in different parts of myself in different areas, but maybe not as a whole.
Yeah. Something else I wanted to ask you about was, most South Asians, I don't know, doctors, lawyers, engineers, we stick to nice, safe jobs. So, what made you want to be this entrepreneur?
Well, so I am an engineer. So in some
Yeah.
ways, I didn't
Yeah.
go too far.
Yeah.
So I crossed that off the list. But I actually loved engineering, and my
Mm.
parents never forced me to do it. My dad's actually not he's a chemist. So sciences were something that was always very important in our family. But my mom is an artist. So there was always that appreciation for arts and design, and I don't think they, forced anything upon us. But I saw, growing up, being a part of my dad's story. I mean, all of our family vacations were work trips, or, my dad's business and what he started when he came to this country was really what my upbringing was about. And I saw so much of the world through him growing his business. And I think entrepreneurship just kind of came naturally to me because I saw that as my dad's career path. And then when you add, passion for science and engineering, I mean, if you look at any of my cousins, we're all, engineers, and, very stereotypical, but I think we embrace it. I think
Yeah.
all of us did it and really love it and are passionate about it. I personally am very involved in the College of Engineering even now, finding ways to attract students, and especially women, into the major, because I just find so much value in it. But I agree that, it's not the only path, but I think it's a great one. So I kind of have that old school mentality, I think.
No, no, it's great. Look at what you've done with it. It's not, I think it's not so much are you going the expected path, but what are you doing with it? I think there's an
Mm.
aspect of go down the expected path and be very safe. I mean, you've certainly not been the safe choice. You've not said, oh, I'm going to have this job for 50 years. So I don't think
Yeah.
you've definitely gone down that path. So talk to me, Michelle, about Ranavat, your whole kind of journey, kind of starting it at home to now this, I don't know, global luxury brand. How did it all begin?
It all began with the idea and a dream, really, just kind of thinking about creating something that represented a little slice of Indian history, Indian artisanship, craftsmanship, science behind, modern science all began in India. And so I was very passionate about sharing that and giving that spotlight where I feel like it was just not shared traditionally. And I never envisioned to create, like, oh, I'm going to create this global company and get to travel and connect with South Asians and introduce the concept of Ayurveda to, so many beyond the South Asian community. I was honestly just really happy doing the work and discovering or rediscovering these traditions or ingredients and just living my life with its purpose tied to my heritage and culture. That's really all I ever wanted. And that's what I still want. I think some of the, launching in Harrods and Sephora and all of that is amazing. And that was, of course, as someone that's ambitious, something that I would have loved to accomplish, but it was never the goal. It was always a byproduct. And the goal is always to serve the customer. And I knew that if I could serve the customer in a way where they felt connected. I mean, I'll actually try to pull something up. I received a very sweet message, and it's very indicative of the way people connect and feel when they try the product. And that just summarizes my goal, which is to make people feel something.
Oh, that's really beautiful. Um, did it literally start in your home? Because I remember watching something on Instagram where you said, I used to ship these products from home, and now, there's this massive kind of chain behind me. Did it start at home?
Yeah, it started at home. I mean, I
How?
didn't
Tell me, tell me.
I think honestly, most ideas probably start in the home, right? I mean, we come up with something we want to
Mm.
do and we just pull out our laptops and we start mood boarding and Googling and researching. And that's really how our brand started too. And in the typical South Asian way, I didn't just decide I wanted this idea and then started spending a ton of money and being like, oh, I need an office and I need these people to work for me and I need this. And, no way. I was still working my other job and I wanted to prove out this idea because, at that time, it's not like Indian beauty brands did not exist. Like it's
Yeah,
such a weird, I mean, in the US,
yeah.
but it's such a weird thing to think about. But it wasn't like the idea of even hair oiling
Yes,
was an odd concept. And
yes.
now because we've all kind of come together and championed and we've been, messaging and sharing for 5 years now, it's really surfaced into the mainstream. But back then, it wasn't like, yeah, I had a big idea and all of a sudden I was ready to spend whatever it took. It was all about proving out the idea. And over time, we created a business where we could afford to invest in office space and people and, everything that goes along with running a business.
So true what you just said there about, the traditions that for us are so natural. The hair oiling that you mentioned. I was thinking about it like it was such a, coming from South India, it was such a part of a daily ritual. You kind of
Mm.
oiled your hand, then you had a bath, and that was kind of what you did every day. But I remember when you went outside, even Mumbai, where I grew up, a lot of kids would make fun of me, saying, "Oh, look at her oily hair," this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much judgment sometimes of rituals that maybe are specific to your heritage, outside of that heritage. So it gets me a bit annoyed now that, everybody's drinking turmeric lattes
Correct.
and, you know, using coconut oil in their food. And these are rituals and traditions that we've had for thousands and thousands of years?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few ways to look at it. I mean, when I started the brand, there was a huge wellness boom.
Mm.
People were really, focused on meditation, especially during the pandemic. People were really excited about meditation. Obviously, yoga for so many years has been, permeated in the West. And this whole smoothie culture had really started in LA And, like what kind of adaptogens would you like to put into your smoothie? And people would pay like 10, 20, $30 for like an ashwagandha smoothie, and
Mm.
they would call it wellness, which is fine. But I think the goal that, or really the responsibility that many of us have, especially if we are South Asian, we understand the roots. We need to share the origins, and we need to tell people the why. This is not a new trendy thing, but adaptogens are really great for managing stress. Why is that important? Well, stress creates inflammation. How do we create a long, balanced, healthy life? Ongoing meditation, exercise for the brain. And those ideas, are things that I think we have the opportunity to share because we're just a little closer to the history of it.
Yeah.
And so while I think I'm so glad that however it's happening, that people are seeing value in our traditions, but so long as I'm a part of this conversation, I really want people to understand the why, not to prove anything, but to really share the deeper meaning behind all of these rituals. Even something like kajal, right?
Yeah.
It's so beautiful, but there's a huge meaning in terms of, evil eye and, that aspect of it, what beauty and how that relates, like eyes being windows to the soul. It's just
Yeah.
deeper than a beauty product. And how can we
Yeah.
share those really authentic stories that might have been lost along the way when we're in a drugstore and pulling an eyeliner? How can we tie that to what the real origins of why we even wear eyeliner exist? And that's what I want to bring to the world.
I think that's absolutely beautiful. And I think in this world of, where we're consuming and even self care is a thing we're doing, we're like, oh my God, you got to
Mhm.
do this, got to do that. Why are you putting kajal in your eyes? Why are you oiling your hair? What's the actual, the kind of almost scientific reason? Because Ayurveda is science.
Oh, yeah.
Um, so I think this education that you're doing to the world about these products or these rituals is really, really meaningful. And I'm so glad you're doing it. It's fantastic, actually.
Well, thank you.
Um,
And I think one thing I just want to mention, it kind of ties back to your original question about engineering. And I think I ask these questions and I want to know the why all the time because that's the engineering mindset that I have with me that
mm,
I bring to everything.
mm,
That I actually do want to know what is the science behind Ayurveda? Why does putting oil in your hair benefit your hair and scalp? And so digging into that, you end up coming out with a lot of science-based
mm,
reasoning, which is such a universal language, right?
yeah,
If I told you that balancing your scalp, and there's a reason that oil can balance your scalp and in turn, increase microcirculation of this area to why that can promote hair growth. Doesn't matter what language, if you know anything about Ayurveda, you're excited because we're talking about science. It's universal. So it's just such a kind of full circle
yeah,
moment.
yeah, yeah. I wanted to talk to you about Ayurveda. So I'm a huge kind of advocate of it. I went to this Ayurveda hospital in Coimbatore, did the whole 21-day Panchakarma, changed my diet completely based on a lot of things they said to me. But I've really seen the benefit and the kind of reasoning and, like you say, the science behind it, right?
Mhm.
What role has Ayurveda played in your life and your work?
I mean, it is my life. So
Mm,
it's every moment of every day is Ayurveda for me. I mean, whether it's the work aspect, but even when we launch a product, we really start with Ayurveda itself to think about what are concepts that haven't really been popularized. So for example, we just launched our Lotus Cleansing Balm. One thing we talk about is dincharya.
yeah.
Dincharya is about having a routine and having a ritual and how important that is. And it's not a crazy complex concept, but we really like to use these moments as an opportunity to share the Ayurveda toolbox with others. How can we make dincharya practical to everybody? How can we just increase awareness to the benefits of having a routine? And so we actually work with an Ayurvedic practitioner Kirti, she's amazing. And, we sort of partner with each other all the time because I have an engineering, as you know, background, but
Yeah.
she really comes from someone that studied Ayurveda. And I always kind of have this respect, and I want to shine a light on the practitioners because they've really spent their lives studying. And I want to do justice to the fact that it's not just something that, like, oh, I'm going to read a couple articles and say that I'm an Ayurvedic expert. Like, I'm not an Ayurvedic expert. I'm an engineer and I love formulation, and Ayurveda is an inspiration for me, but I'm actually not an expert. And so that's why we really like to tap into people like Kirti and make sure that we're doing justice and not just saying anyone can be some Ayurvedic expert. So we really like to do that. But in doing that, we enrich so much of our own knowledge when it comes to these amazing practices. And it's such a great thing for people in our community because they can take little pieces of it and add it to their life.
Absolutely. And there's so much, isn't it? Like for people who don't know, maybe it's a 3,000-year-old. Is it 3,000 years old, Michelle?
I think
Something
it's
like that, right?
5,000, but I think,
Yeah.
it's many thousands,
Many
we'll say.
thousands of years old. And it's a whole system of looking after your health and kind of physical, emotional, spiritual health. And these practices, which Michelle's talking about, so dinacharya is what you do every day what is your routine. And there's a lot of kind of thought and science and thinking behind every single thing, from the food we put in our bodies. How does that nourish us? Are we eating the right food, the wrong food? How are we doing rituals? What are all our ailments are connected to some sort of imbalance in our system? That's fundamentally what Ayurveda is, for those who don't know. I wanted to talk to you about Ranavat and the ingredients, because I know you talk about this a lot. That you source the ingredients from the source, I think, which is wherever it's coming from, whether it's saffron, whether it's whatever you're using. And you go to a lot of Indian towns and villages and cities, I'm guessing. Could you talk about why this is important to you? And I also know that you work with a lot of artisans who've been doing that particular preparation or creating that for thousands of years, so they know what they're doing. And
Oh,
that
yeah.
very much is the ethos of your brand, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's two aspects of it. One is the science and formulation. So you have to go where the plants are the freshest and where they exist, right? So, number one, it's understanding the whole supply chain. How long is it taking from when the flowers are blooming to when you're actually extracting the oils? What's the process of extraction? Once it's extracted, where is it stored? What's the movement? How quickly do they move? How are the batches? So there's a lot that goes into, when you just pump a product in your hands, there's really such a huge, vast supply chain behind that, all the way down to like a farmer or someone mixing, all the way to where you get it today. And so understanding that process is hugely important to me because it impacts the entire experience, the efficacy, and the quality. And I think all of those things work hand in hand together. So I want to bring to people experiences that they like. For example, I actually found the note that this woman sent, and this is just on a DM
Yeah.
that she sent me yesterday. And she lives in France, and she's a South Asian living in France. And she said, after 25 years away from my homeland, your product not only makes my skin glow, but the aroma takes me back to my childhood memories. When putting jasmine on our hair while doing Bharatanatyam or while doing puja, we called it Malipu in the South. We had loose flower sellers walking the streets, and if we needed a garland, they would sit under the shade of the porch, and the gentle breeze, we would smell the whiff of jasmine.
Oh,
And
that's giving me goosebumps.
isn't that beautiful?
Yeah,
And
stunning.
she's saying that she's connecting to those
Yeah,
moments because of our product, and that
yeah,
we're bringing her back to this time in her life. And you
yeah.
can only do that if you have actual jasmine from that area that you're bringing. And between what happens, when it's picked and when I get it, there's so many things. So you have to go see that with your eyes and really understand the time in which it's picked. And so I really, in order to get that type of comment from someone that lives in France that I've literally never seen, and she's able to conjure these memories, and she feels so moved that she has to write me this message. There has to be something there that's really real and substantial in order for someone around the world to make that comment. And I think that kind of goes into the whole process and supply chain and why that's so hugely important to me. And then when it comes to artisans and your question about that, I think it goes back to luxury and defining luxury. For me, luxury isn't the most expensive thing in the world. Luxury is the most precious, and precious to me means, if someone's making a kansa wand, actually, this is a product that it's a kansa comb. And there's a lot of imperfections on this comb, but it's made handmade in Rajasthan, by an artisan that's been doing it for 6 generations. And so it just means when you hold it in your hand, every imperfection and every little divot is really unique to this comb. And I just feel that there's something really powerful when I'm holding 6 generations of this work in my hand and I'm supporting these families and preserving this art form. Because we see that in fashion all the time, the embroidery and the karigars and all that.
Yeah.
There's that whole concept beyond just fashion. And so that's kind of, this tool, it's a beautiful object. Is it necessary for every person? No, it's not at all. But for people that really want a luxury that you can't buy, really, that's what this is. It symbolizes something more.
Absolutely. And I think not only is it luxury because it's that rare, but I guess with that work, you keep alive a tradition that's existed for thousands of years as well. You know,
Mhm.
that karigar who's making that comb in that particular part of Rajasthan, it carries on. And I think that's really, really beautiful. Um, Talking about beautiful and beauty, I wanted to talk about beauty being still very much a very Eurocentric concept that I see in the world. So, whether it's magazines or fashion or advertising, beauty still more or less is, in my head, a skinny blonde woman. Um, is this what you think as well? And how do we kind of change that? How do we make women like you and I and other people like us feel beautiful in this world?
I think that it is very hard because for so many years we were told something. And so all of a sudden, we've now had the approval to say or the realization to admit that, wow, there's so much beauty in what we do. It doesn't automatically happen that way. But I've always had a deep, deep sense of pride for our culture. And I do feel everyone's culture, no matter where you come from, you're so lucky to be a part of wherever you're a part of. And I think that the more that we see people embrace each other, so we've been embracing Western culture for quite some time, right? Like we're
Yeah.
obsessed with the sitcoms and we, always wanted to be like those icons, in Friends and whatever. But I start seeing now like the other way around, and that's really exciting. And I think it just really brings us close together. So whether it's someone that's never hair oiled before and they're hair oiling and they're like, oh, wow, this is so amazing, they're embracing our culture, as simple as that is. And so the more that they do that to us, we start kind of creating this cycle of we're all just lucky to be who we are, and we can learn from each other. We don't want to be someone else. We want to be ourselves. And so I see that, but I think it takes a lot of time to unlearn those habits because, for half of our lives, we've seen other people get the spotlight and those are the it girls,
Yeah.
but it's changing. So I think we're making progress.
Which is really good to hear. And maybe if we didn't see those kind of role models when we were growing up, maybe the next generation will, and that
Yeah,
that
and one thing I want to say is that we don't need to bring ourselves up by bringing other people down.
so true.
It's like not to say that, oh, well, now, we don't want to support those people. Now only these types of people are
Yeah.
pretty. And I don't really think we need to we need to do that. I think we just need to be assured in who we are and be
Hmm.
happy to be who we are as much as we can to find that gratifying, or just to find that confidence inside,
Yeah.
because that emanates out. And I think we'll all, like, there's no need to now saying, oh, well, now it's our turn and we have to only, focus on this one type of person, because then we're doing what was done to us. So let's just all celebrate who we are and, come together. That's sort of my mentality.
Yeah. And let's define beauty as this multi dimensional,
Mhm.
varied experience rather than any one singular experience, right?
Absolutely.
I also wanted to talk about beauty from a South Asian angle. It's very limiting. It's what is a typically beautiful South Asian woman, like Bollywood stars, for example. They're fair skinned, they have long hair, a tiny waist. So they are a particular type, and most of us don't fit that. I mean, regular South Asian women don't. How do we broaden that ideal of beauty within our own culture? Do you think?
I mean, Bollywood is, let's just say, maybe not the
Hmm.
most fair or wholesome
Yeah.
industry. And I think there's a lot of broken things in Bollywood. And, you know, I, I think it would be really hard to completely dismantle this industry that has been fueled by, whether it be stereotype, pushing certain type of look, pushing certain type of families, pushing, and
Yeah.
I think it's pretty well known that it's not, like, I would say, a healthy
Hmm.
industry the way that it's been crafted. But I also think some of it is like, you are what you see and do. So if you don't want to consume that media and you
Hmm.
want to understand or take it for the surface level that it is, knowing the problems that it has, I think that's okay.
Yeah.
Because Bollywood is, I love Bollywood songs, and
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
certain
Yeah.
things that I love. So I'm not going to shun the whole thing, but I
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
recognize
Yeah.
it has a lot of problems and a lot of issues. It doesn't treat a lot of people well. And
Yeah.
I know that that's an issue.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just one, bringing awareness to that. And then two, taking it for that surface level and hoping that that changes. And it has to change, because I don't think that will last
Hmm.
forever.
Hmm.
And I think, well, I just hope. I mean, I have no control of Bollywood,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
I did, I would love to make a change.
Absolutely. But it's beyond Bollywood though, isn't it? And that's what I mean. The the idea of beauty in our culture is very narrow. Bollywood is one big example of it. But even within that, so say you go to a wedding and auntie might say, oh, you're too thin or you're too fat or you're too whatever. It's a very narrow lens, I think. And I think that's quite problematic. So, as much as the Western world has this one stereotypical image of beauty, so does South Asian culture. I think that's my kind of query, rather. I mean, not that I expect you to give me an answer, but it's more this is not okay. And, we need to change
I
it. And
think
how do we
that's
change
changing
it?
I think it is changing a lot. I mean, again, not living in India, but I've seen more inclusive campaigns. I
Mm,
feel that, I mean, even in brands like Papa Don't Preach, like, they don't
yeah.
even have sizes on their
Yeah.
product.
Yeah.
Like, it's they're showcasing different types of people.
Yeah.
So they're one example of the way that the next generation of Indian brands are really positioning beauty. So yes, the fair and lovely era was there and did
Mm,
exist. And, you could go into a lot of detail on why we
mm,
felt that way and what was the
mm,
influence and why
mm,
did we not want to be who we were.
mm.
And, like, that's a whole traumatic
Yeah.
past.
Yeah.
But I do think that Indian companies and brands and Indian people themselves are starting to wake up a bit and realize that we were, people there were very much in a bit of a trance.
Mm,
And we have to wake up to accepting and not putting down our own selves. It's a very, very sad, actually, concept, if you really think about it, that we were taught to not love who we were.
yeah.
But I really do feel very optimistic. I have to say, like, looking at this new generation of brands, who they're showcasing, the conversations, It's amazing. So there's so much promise. And yes, we could look back on the history and see how backwards it was. But let's look to the future and, to quote Gandhi, let's be the change that we hope to see. So
Yeah,
that's kind of what I'm hoping for.
great. Um, I also wanted to talk about beauty in the context of growing older, you know? Um, Again, traditionally in the West and in the East, beauty has been considered the preserve of young people. And as women, we're told that only the young are beautiful, and as we age, we are less so. And that really bothers me. And I think we need to find ways to stop the world making us feel bad about what is a really natural, beautiful process, aging. I know you talked about it somewhere, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm almost 42, and so I definitely have signs of aging as one would naturally. And I think there's a difference between finding that pride to take care of yourself, but then, that can go in the wrong direction if you are, you know, overly like trying to preserve yourself in a 20-year-old figure, because that's obviously just going to get disappointing at some
Yeah,
point, because
yeah,
that's not the case. And I think that there is a part of work that we have to do ourselves. Yes, of course, like people are focusing on Gen Z and marketing, and a lot of the models that we see, or it is hard. There's always this external stimulus of what does a 40-year-old look like, and how do we fit into that. But I also feel like there's some work that we have to do ourselves in accepting and coming to terms with our changing bodies and finding joy in that process. And it's not easy at all. But I think it's work that we have to do ourselves, and it's hard work because despite everything around us that's telling us that aging is not good, we have to somehow find it within ourselves. But I think it's an important exercise that we all have to do.
do you not find like that's almost an impossible thing if around like, and I talk about it personally also, you 45, I'm 50. So all around, when the message is very much young is beautiful, and we've all got to aspire to look younger, to be younger somehow. How
I
then, I think,
Yeah,
and
go ahead.
it's a question to myself and to you, I think.
I mean, I don't like aspire to look younger, but I aspire to look good at my age. And I think
Mm,
there's like a difference
mm,
between that. Like it's funny, when I was at home with my parents, my dad was saying that when my parents got married, I'm the age that my nanny was. And so when we think about how old my
wow.
nanny was when my parents got married, we're like, oh my God, she's wearing a sari. She's like older, whatever. And
Mm,
I'm that age right now. And so some of it is just like, first of all, the average age, the life expectancy in India was much lower
yeah.
at that time, even 40 years ago. Things have changed. We were living a lot longer. So now the actual acceptance of aging is coming into play more because we have longer lives to live. So we're actually like, in this above 40 phase for longer than we've ever been. So it's kind of new territory, but it's also like what she was doing at her age. Like she was getting her kids married. I have
Mm,
like a 7-year-old. So it's a
mm,
very different
yeah.
uh, phase in how old we are acting and the phases of life that we're interacting with. And I do think that, yeah, I mean, what we thought was older is like changing now. Like what someone can do in their 40s is very different. And my dad was like, oh my God, 60s is so young, and 70. And I think that too. And I think I have to say, I do think the perspective, it's shifting, but I don't have like a real answer other than it has to come from within. This
Mm,
acceptance has to come from within. There's no, yes, you're going to be, we could create a world where everyone celebrates aging. Fine. I don't think that's going to happen in our lifetime, but let's say that it does. I still think it's going to be hard. It's not easy.
yeah.
And I think it's just up to us. How can we accept where we are in life and enjoy the moments and the aging that we've done, and understand that we're not going to be happy about it all the time? Who's going to
Mm,
be happy when like it hurts to get up?
yeah,
You're
of
not as
course.
mobile. You
Of
can't
course.
celebrate that. Like
Of
that's of
course.
course, but you can find ways to appreciate where you are in life. And I think if I asked you like, would you want to, I remember those days where we live in New York and we just want to go out all the time. And I was like, oh, I can't believe a day where I'll want to stay in. And now I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't even want to do
I love
anything. So
staying
it's
in.
like,
Yeah. And that's an
you
age
just kind
thing.
of like get over stuff,
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
you get over certain
Yeah.
things and maybe you just come to accept, or maybe you
Yeah.
don't want to do the things that maybe you don't care about. Get over the idea
Yeah.
of, having a forehead wrinkle. I
Yeah.
think that is what naturally happens.
Yeah.
But it has to come from within,
Yeah.
truly.
No, no, no. I hear you. So I guess what you're saying is it's an internal journey first and most of
Mhm.
all. And then the external can change, may change, but what we can change is the internal journey, right? To it.
Yeah, and being in the beauty industry myself, I don't think there's anything wrong with looking your best. And I think
Mm,
that's
yeah.
very different
Yes.
than looking
Agreed.
younger.
Agreed.
So that's like a huge point of differentiation that I want to make. It's like we're not trying to be who we're not. We're just trying to feel really good in the skin that we have.
So, Michelle, you and I were talking about the beauty of rituals, beauty of like Indian, South Asian rituals, stuff we've grown up with, oiling our hair in the morning. Or I think for me, a beautiful ritual is Diwali morning. You warm up oil, sesame seed oil, and you kind of, my mom used to call it an oil bath. So you kind of massage this warm sesame oil on your body and you kind of have a hot shower in the morning. And I still do this now in London. I've started doing it at home. And there's this sense of like, I feel this warmth inside me. And I don't think it's just the warmth of the oil. I just feel like warm and nurtured and nourished. And I put on my like Diwali outfit. And there's something very ceremonial about it and something very kind of connected to the root of who I am. I wonder if you could talk about the importance of ritual, these kind of rituals, for our own sense of well being.
Yeah, ritual, the definition of it is actually simple act of devotion. So it can be, a ritual for religious purposes. It can be like your Diwali ritual, but this act of devotion, you know, whether it's to someone else, to ourselves, I think there's something to be said about the word devotion
Mm.
and what that means to us mentally, right? Or spiritually, I will say. And I really do think there's something beautiful about the concept of, you know, devoting your time, your energy, your mind share to something that's been done with your family for generations, and taking a moment to connect with that part of yourself. There's something about ritual, whether it has nothing to do with, where you're from, but something that makes you feel really good today. You can set new rituals. Um, it's this idea of combining habit, which gets back to Dincharya, and outward devotion or some sort of spiritual connection, whether that be religious to your own roots and ancestors. And I think that that gives us a mental uh, compass and a reminder that we're here today and this is really precious and we're valuing the moment now. And we could go on, and once we get to our desk, we're really busy and we're focusing on all of our emails. But that moment that we were doing our ritual, we actually stopped time for a moment and lived in the present. So I really think it's a way that we live in the now and we appreciate the moment. And I think the same with, going to temples and religious ceremonies. Like, really, there's something there that feels very grounding.
Absolutely. And I guess that's true from a personal and a kind of a social sense, isn't it? Personal for us because it's like grounding, it's kind of comforting. And also socially, it's like something that, like you were saying, maybe your parents did or their parents did, and it's kind of gone on for
Mhm.
generations. I wanted to talk about self care. It's this kind of buzzword for the last couple of years, and everybody that we know on Instagram or anywhere else is like, this is my self care ritual, and I journal, and I do this, and I do that. But self care doesn't have to be like 20 products, 20-step skincare routine or spending thousands in a spa or any of that, right? Self care can be simpler than that, right?
Yeah, I think self-care is a mindset, right? It's lighting and what is the intention behind it? Because I could do a skincare ritual and just like be really quick about it. And that's not really self-care. That's just me doing cleaning my face, cleansing my face for a purpose. But if I make it more of a, mentally, I'm like, ooh, this is I'm thinking different thoughts, and I'm, using special products, and I'm making it a ceremony, and I'm just like, so it's all about intention that you have. And so it's drawing and pairing that intention with a process or act and combining those two together.
What can we do? So if you were to give advice, say to me, to say, Sangeeta, here are three things. Here's how you could approach it. This evening, when you're putting on your makeup, removing your makeup and putting on your moisturizer, what do I think about that makes it more self care, that makes it more of that moment?
I mean, for me, of course, I'm very biased, but that's why I love using our products, is because the scent and the texture are very sensorial. So it's very easy to put yourself in that ritualistic mindset when you're using them. Saffron itself is very meditative and anti-anxiety. So when you're putting saffron on your third eye, this is such a very like important part of your intuition. And so you can dig into that and say, yeah, when I'm putting the saffron serum, is very easy because of the ingredients and what they're known for, and the sense and the ideas that they conjure up, for you to feel like it is a ritual. So, I think that makes it a lot easier. So that is why and how. I don't think it definitely has to be so elaborate, but it's really in that intention, that moment, and that is one way that I love connecting.
I love that. Absolutely love that. So, I know you've talked about how building Ranavat connected you even more deeper to your own heritage. And we are made of different parts, like we're American and we're South Asian and we're British and we're whatever. How else might we connect these different parts of ourselves? For you, I know it was a big part of how you built Renawat, but how are the other ways that we can do that, do you think?
Connect with ourselves, you're saying?
Connect with our heritage.
Connect with our, I mean, there's so many ways, right? Like food or dance, or I think there's no there's no real answer, I think, to that
Hmm.
question.
Hmm.
It's up to you on what, if lighting incense is a way that you think about your grandfather every day, and that incense is something that your household has used for a long time. That's a very simple thing that might have meaning to you. It might have zero meaning to someone else.
Hmm.
And so I
Hmm.
think that answer truly does come from within.
Why do you think it's important for young brown girls to see someone like you in magazines, to see your products in their beauty shelf? What does that do for a little girl in another small town in America today?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a few things. I mean, of course, from a product perspective, being able to see a hair oil that maybe, we grew up with feeling maybe shy about, the fact that it's at Harrods, very exciting for us, because we get to see our traditions in a way that maybe we didn't get the opportunity to see. So I
Yeah.
think it is really important to show their value, very much in a superficial way, but it is still kind of nice. I mean, to
Yeah.
have that representation for our rituals in those types of places that they've never been before. So I think that's like very validating. And then I think one thing that I hope to bring out more is, there has been all of focus on kind of youth and being this entrepreneur, 30 under 30 kind of thing. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think that's great. Find your ambition early and tap into it, but that's not the only way. And I want people to see that moms with kids are doing things, people that don't have kids that are, like you, in their 50s, like living their dream
Yeah.
and hosting this amazing show. Like, that's such a great example um, that you're creating. But it's really that different archetypes of success. Like, you don't have to be this like cookie cutter mold of what we think success looks like. So I really hope to see more examples of that.
Wonderful. So if 5-year-old Michelle was sitting here with us and you had something to say to her, what would you say? As this Michelle who's created this amazing brand and is this success story, what would you say to 5-year-old Michelle?
I would say trust the journey, I guess. And, that's something that I feel like our parents say to us, and we just say, well, you don't understand because it's so painful now, whether I got laid off from my finance job or, moved from New York. I never wanted to leave and come to LA. And, all these changes were so hard for me, but they actually were putting me in the right place. And I think that's what I've learned now, having lived over 40 years. I can say that I now finally see those pieces come together. You have to live long enough to understand that.
Yeah, so trust the journey, that it will all work out for the best,
Yeah, that,
really.
that it's happening for you, not to you, kind of
Yeah,
thing.
that's beautiful. And that's a huge difference, what you just said there.
Yeah.
Finally, have you got any advice for listeners of Masala Podcast? Anything that you'd like to say to them?
I would say that, I guess it depends on, what their perspective in life is, but I would say if there's something that you can do kind of back to ritual and think about, instead of going through the motions every day and crossing things off your to-do list, take a bit of a different approach and think about what things you might want. Like, kind of, instead of your schedule running you running your schedule. Is it, a beautiful, elaborate skincare routine in the evening that you can look forward to every now and then? Is it something special that you're treating yourself? Is it this incense? What is something really simple and special, and it doesn't have to cost anything, for you to just add as a moment of joy, a moment of reflection and intention in your day. I would just love to encourage people to think about that.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you, Michelle. It's been an absolutely lovely conversation. Thank you for taking the time and talking about your journey and all the ways that we can kind of add these little rituals in our life that make it a lot richer. Thank you for being
Oh,
a Masala podcast.
oh no, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.